Hello and welcome to another episode of Steelfur Speaks with me, Steelfur, aka Finbar, your UK-based flesh and blood content creator, narrator, news reporter, whatever you want to call me at this point. There's a lot of interesting stuff that's been happening in Flesh and Blood, hasn't there? First, just a bit about myself, just what I've been up to. Those of you who know me, follow me closely, will know that I have been in New York recently. I was in New York for about a week for work, so that's why there hasn't been as much content this month. I have been active on Twitter quite a lot, so if you haven't followed me on Twitter and you want more regular interactions with me, at Steelfur Speaks on Twitter, I'm on there quite a lot, probably too much, or X, whatever it's supposed to be called, talking about Fab, keeping up with the latest news and seeing what's happening. It's really a good platform for that kind of thing, even though it's getting worse by the day. So I was in New York. I really loved New York as a city. I really enjoyed the food. I just enjoyed how much variety and everything there was. Every time I turned a corner, it seemed like there was a food stand or there was a restaurant that looked good. And then when I searched for restaurants, it was almost too much. It was everything has 4.5 stars. If you're good, if you're not good, you go out of business because the rent in Manhattan is so high. I stayed near Times Square. The event was near Times Square and in the Yale Club, so I got to see that. It was really nice. The only real downside of the trip was the weather. Now, I am an Irishman. I know I don't always sound like it, but I could, probably go a bit more Irish if I wanted to. But that's not the point, right? The point is, I don't mind rain, but there's a type of rain where it's just heavy drizzle permanently. You just can't do anything, really. So I spent about 4 or 5 hours sightseeing every day, and then I was just too wet and miserable. I went back to my hotel room and dried off and just didn't make it out the next day, right? So New York was good. I ate a lot of ramen. I went to Ichiran, or Ishiran, or however you pronounce it. I went to Ippudo. I went to a few different spots. Had some, I think I had a taco with some friends. It was great. The food was great. The weather was terrible. My event was good. The knock-on, of course, of the event is that I get a 6:30 flight to be back in the UK at 6 a.m. on the Thursday after spending 4 or 5 days running around at a conference. And the last thing that I can physically make myself do is record a podcast or talk to people, in that kind of outgoing way. So content has to kind of take a pause when I go on one of those trips. It's not really practical to keep it going. For those of you who know me or don't know me that well, so I do have dyspraxia, which is one of those lovely, my partner and I, we call them neurospicy conditions. Physical activity, action, especially when it's being observed by other people, is much more tiring for me than the average person. So when I go to one of these conferences and I have to network and be observed and act normal and not do weird movements with my body or fidget or do all these kind of things for a long period of time, I do find that quite draining. So then you add jet lag into that, and it just becomes very hard to think about making content, doing all these kinds of things. And it takes, I would say, longer for me to get back into that rhythm of being home, going to the gym, doing all those kind of things. But we're back. We've been to the gym. I benched. I was down a bit because I've taken 2 weeks off, but I benched, 80 this week, which wasn't bad. Squatted 110 something. I can move weight when I need to. I need to do more cardio. I need to lose more weight and bring that BMI down. But, things are going quite well. So I'm in a really good place. I am a lot more optimistic for the World Championship sealed event. I'm finding that, because I've been doing this thing where I've been opening 4-packs, building seal pools. I've done that for a box or two now. I'm feeling a lot more optimistic that regardless of what I open, I should be able to build something serviceable. It is a bit tricky because if you don't get Evos to go Teklo, then you kind of have to get a max pool or a dash pool that's capable of going over Teklo fatigue. And that's kind of tricky to get that quantity and that volume of stuff that you need. So really, I'm optimistic. I think I will be able to get a good score at that calling, that sealed calling. And I will have side event tickets. So even if it does go tits up is a great UK phrase, by the way. It means, everything's fallen over and you're just lying there tits up into the world. And, it'll be fine, right? It'll be fine. I've got a fun weekend in Barcelona. It's only, 5 weeks away now? But I am feeling more optimistic than I was before the pre-release. When I first heard there was a sealed calling, I was like, what the hell are you doing? This is a dumb idea. But I've come around to it. I think Bright Lights as a set works. I have, however, noticed that the calling they're doing in New Zealand is sealed with the next set, Heavy Hitters, and Day 2 is a draft. But I don't think Day 2 of this calling is a draft. I'm unsure yet exactly what's happening with this calling. I don't know if you play your same sealed deck for 2 days. I imagine that's not the case because someone would find it very easy to cheat and just go home with their deck and do whatever to it. I imagine there's a second sealed pool if you make Day 2, but I really don't know. So we're gonna wait and see on that front. Aside from that, what I've been done, I kind of fell down a hole with a game called Terraria. It's kind of like Minecraft but in 2D. I saw a streamer watching it and I like really looked fun, so I've been playing that. I've done loads. I started playing Cyberpunk again, like just to deal when I came back from the US. I started playing Cyberpunk again. Huge changes to Cyberpunk following that patch, and it's just really fun since the changes, so it's been really good. I've been playing League. My reflexes are not great, partly tied to the dyspraxia, so League is not necessarily my best game, especially because of the tiredness. So when I come back from work or that kind of thing, or if I've been to the gym, it's very hard for my reflexes to keep up. So I am a bronze player, but I do still enjoy playing League, and it's one of those things where if I played consistently and grind out the games, like I have a like 55% win rate or whatever. So if I kept playing, I would theoretically get silver or climb, but I don't have enough time to grind out that many games. So I am firmly stuck, nicely down in bronze, but that's fine. I enjoy a game every now and then. And then aside from that, just been playing little bits of Baldur's Gate. I really need to set aside like a weekend to dig into that. Yeah, and that's been good. Aside from that, I've been cooking so much as well. Those of you who follow me on Twitter or like chat to me on Discords will know that I am really keen on cooking, especially like Chinese, Asian cooking. So this week I cooked mala chicken, which is like this super spicy. It uses like 40 dried red chilies. It uses Szechuan peppers. You get this like fried chicken. It's really good. I can't pronounce. I'm going to butcher this. Anyone who speaks Chinese, I apologize. My girlfriend, who studied Chinese, has been trying to teach me. But I would say it's Jian Bing, but apparently it's Jian Bing. Anyway, if I did that right, great. If I didn't, fine. Anyway, they're like these meat pancakes. They're like, you make them with dough and then you fry them on both sides. They're kind of like this thick. They have like a mince mixture in the middle. They're really crispy on the outside. I made like 20 of those, so my freezer is now full of them. They are delicious. So we've done that. That's really good. This weekend we're cooking pork belly, as well as something that's like just egg and beef and soy sauce and ginger. Like I'm trying to make like really simple dishes, but with like Asian flavors. So we're going to be doing that. I also bought some like more pork floss. Pork floss is like this really fine pork. It's like really dried pork, and then they dry it even more, and then they shred it, and then dry it more. So it's like this floss. I'm going to be making some congee because the weather's got colder. So that's like a rice soup thing that I cook in the rice cooker, and it's really good with like soy sauce and scallions and like pork floss. And you just get this like really rich rice soup, but you add flavor to it with these really rich ingredients. So that's what's been happening on my like cooking front, my life front. So if you're wondering, hey, I haven't seen Steelfur for a while, that's why. I thought I'd take some time just to talk about what's been going on and just how, traveling for work does impact the content creation schedule. I think that's important to acknowledge, because I like to be regular. I was on a good pattern of doing a video a week, and then someone's like, well, hey, it's time to go to New York. And that's what happens. You got to go to the conference, you got to do the speaking, you got to run the panels and do all this kind of stuff, and it's part of the job, part that I enjoy, so it's worth doing. On to Fab. I mean, there's so much Fab news. For those of you who aren't as connected to LSS as I am, so I think this is just worth it. I am connected with people on LinkedIn. I do see things like job adverts when it goes out. There were 2 very interesting job adverts that got placed recently. The first one is that LSS is hiring a creative writer, like full-time. So this is a person whose job it would be to obviously write stories for heroes. But if you have a full-time writer, that does create more potential opportunities for not novels, but short stories, more in-depth lore, more like kind of refined lore. You can have someone who's in charge of kind of owning the law environment in more detail and making it their full-time job. So we could actually expect to see a lot more sort of writing coming out of LSS. If I lived in New Zealand, I would love to apply for that job. I do not. That is fine. We know LSS has a really good policy of wanting to hire people who work in the country for very good reason. You can't have a team and you can't be remote. So I will stick to my day job of analyzing telecoms equipment, which is fine. And the other one that's quite interesting, which we've already kind of seen has started to have an effect, is that they are looking to hire a European-based convention manager. So that person's job would be to arrange LSS attendance at various conventions. Now, I not only think that they have hired this person, but I also think that person has hit the ground running, because in the past 2 weeks, I have seen notices that there have been actual LSS, so not retailer partners, but actual LSS stands, I think organized by Blackfire, which is the European distributor, at Spiel, which is a German board game convention, and of course this weekend at the Euro Gaming convention or conference in the Excel in London, there is also an LSS stand with lots of space for demoing the game and running armories as well. So if it had been announced a bit more in advance, I would probably have gone to show my support. As it is, I'm gaming with my boys on Saturday, and I'm running sealed practice for Worlds with some other guys at my local shop on Sunday. So I'm not actually free to go to this event, but it is amazing to see LSS on that. So it's probably likely they've already filled that position of European Conventions Manager, and that person has hit the ground running and already identified like 3 or 4 places they could be, and probably got there faster. Or they've just started doing it and then they've realized they need someone to manage it, so they've just brought them on. But either way, either there's been big moves on that front, or there will continue to be big moves on that front. Either way, it is fantastic to see LSS taking part at these board game conventions. They are huge just for people who are outside the TCG sphere actually interacting with Fab. And I think one of the things that we as a community have noticed about Fab is that it is a very good game for people even who aren't necessarily enraptured in the TCG market. People who like board games that are like dueling board games, people who like fighting games. There's lots of appeal in Flesh and Blood beyond just the TCG Magic players, right? The Yu-Gi-Oh players. So getting to these events and demoing it for as many people as possible. When one of the stores in the UK did it 3 years ago at the UK Games Expo, they did 200 demos over the weekend. Every store near where one of those people actually lived got a few new players. It really moved the needle. In my local store, we got 2 new players from that. So that is fantastic, and that sort of thing does need to happen. So that's really cool. We also got the announcement of the next set. So everyone was kind of speculating that there was a deathmatch set just based on the flavor text of the new Brute card in Bright Lights, and that was correct. So the next set, Heavy Hitters, is going to be a arena fighting deathmatch featured set, right? A lot of speculation about what classes are going to be in that set. Brute seems like the obvious one. And obviously, we've already seen a Brute card that would fit into the set, so it's very likely that whatever it's called, the smashing card that blows up artifacts that came in the expansion slot in Bright Lights was in Deathmatch and has been shifted earlier just to give Brute some tools against Mech a bit sooner. So it is likely we will see a Brute. It is likely that Brute is going to continue the draw a card, and if you discard a 6 power, then you get X bonus. I will say that from what I'm seeing, it's like they're leaning into that draw, discard, get a 6 power, get a bonus effect quite a lot. And we are reaching the point of saturation where Brute players will be able to guarantee the majority of their cards are plus 6 power. So then that stops becoming a drawback and just starts being a reality. If I can build a deck that's mostly yellows and reds, where all of them are 6 power, and then I have 10 blues that aren't, then it becomes just like Boost Dash was before, they had to stop running all of the non-dash cards, right? Before they got all the new cards in Bright Lights that let them take out all the non-dash cards, or like they already were in Blitz, right? It just becomes I know I will hit a 6 power, so really all that matters is what 6 powers I play. And if we reach that point, then the additional cost of draw and discard isn't really an additional cost in the terms of it's not random, so it's not an additional cost that you can miss on, so it's not like random as Brute has been before. It turns then instead into a deck tax like Boost is, which is kind of interesting. Now, I don't think we'll ever reach the point just because of how blues are costed, and also we've seen, like James White has said, or is it Brian Gottlieb? One of the designers has said in an interview that actually printing something like Macho Grand, where it's a super powerful 6-power attack that's blue. I think Macho Grand blue is 7, but the point is that printing super powerful attacks in blue was a mistake. In Guardian to a certain extent, so we may see that them getting full suite of 6-power attacks in blue in Brute might not happen, or they might be the ones that don't block, right? So they might get 6-power blues that don't block, which will be them paying attacks in another way. So I think we're going to end up probably after the next set with kind of like a ratio of Brute can probably have like 40 to we'll say I was going to say 40 to 50 cards, but let's just talk about it in percentages. So maybe like 80 to 90% of the deck is 6-power, 10% isn't, and those 6 powers come with a cost, so they either don't block or they have maybe slightly weaker effects than others, but there is a threshold there of density where draw 1, discard if it's +6, get this effect, happens consistently. And then it'll turn into more sort of a deck building tax. So how do I get to this threshold that makes it guaranteed? Which cards are good enough to play even though they aren't 6-power, for example? And we'll reach that point and it'll be kind of a fun point for Brute because it will give them consistency they haven't had before. And then it will just be the question as to how that's balanced, because a lot of the earlier Brute cards are balanced around the randomness of drawing 6-power cards or not. But obviously, if we get rid of the randomness, then they become much more powerful. But Brute is screaming for consistency. We've seen with Levia, like, she got all these amazing good cards. Everyone was super hype on her. And ultimately, consistency is what failed her. And to a certain extent, Lexi's presence in the game also failed her a little bit. But she really does struggle with consistency in those regards. What other classes are being in the set? Personally, I feel like Axe Warrior. We've had lots of support for an Axe Warrior. Where better to put an Axe-focused warrior than in a deathmatch arena set full of blood, guts, and gore? Other people have said Guardian. I'm not entirely against the idea of Guardian. It has been a long time since our last Guardian hero. So if you think about like Tales of Aria as our last proper Guardian, ignoring Yoji and Brevant and the Blitz Guardians, but our last proper adult Guardian was in Tales of Aria, and that was an elemental guardian. We haven't actually had a non-elemental, just regular guardian since the original set, Welcome to Wraith. And if you think about the fact that, the WTR heroes, so obviously Warrior was Dust to Dawn, Ninja, Katsu got reprinted with a load of cards in Outsiders, Brute is obviously missing some, Levia got a boost, but we expect Brute will be in Deathmatch. Guardian hasn't actually been seen in a main set since Tales of Aria. So, we're missing Guardian from that equation. And then, of course, we have, if you look at Welcome to Arcane Rising, we've obviously got Mech box ticked. Runeblade, we just got Vinset. Wizard we have Icelander. Also, I feel like they're not happy with Wizard at the moment. They're probably investing a lot of time into how they can make Wizard different, because without the control elements of Ice, you can't really have a slow deck, but you don't really want to have the combo power of Kano to kill people that quickly. So Wizard is kind of in a bit of a rough place. And then, what was the last one? Ranger, Wizard, Mechanologist, Runeblade. Ranger's taken care of by Azalea and Riptide in Outsiders. So really, if you look at the first 8 heroes of the game, the only one we haven't actually had in a while that I think is easy to print is a Guardian. So it would make sense to get that kind of like, much like you get the gore of the Axe Warrior, maybe you also get the Mangle Guardian coming in. I also do feel like this is a good set for LSS to surprise us. We know they love surprising us. And we haven't had a new class since Assassin, which, got a good chunk of support in, Dynasty Outsiders. But we could get a new class. I personally, people have said, well, you can have the Alchemist that gives people enhancing potions before the fight, or you could have the Merchant who's selling and gambling and betting on the games. Personally, I do not think we will get a new class here. I think one class a year is kind of good enough. And I feel like Arachne and kind of Azuri and the Assassins kind of do it enough for us. We could see more Assassin support, if that makes sense with the theme. But I feel like those three classes, Brute, Guardian, and Warrior, kind of make the most sense. This is kind of also because the set is called Heavy Hitters. Warrior hits heavily with the axe. Brute is focused on big power. Guardian is focused on big power. And we did also just see a rake of cards that care about the power of the attack in the Round the Table set from Tolarian Community College. It makes a lot of sense for those cards to be reprinted in the next available draft set, so it makes sense for those cards to go into heavy hitters. So Guardian makes sense to me, Brute makes sense to me, Warrior makes sense for a lot of reasons. I don't know what other classes would fit in there in the same way. I don't think it's time for a new class yet. Some people have been joking that the other heavy hitter in the game is Illusionist, and they aren't wrong. Illusionist cards are usually quite high base attack, and obviously Phantasm cares about high power. If they put an Illusionist alongside a Guardian and a Brute, that's spicy. That is spicy. I don't know what to say in terms of good, bad, ugly. I know that Aura Illusionist has occasionally got good game with Spectra and things like that into those kind of classes, but they don't want Spectra to come back. They've confirmed that, so I don't see where, because the next Illusionist in the list, I think, is a ward focused Illusionist, just based on the cards we keep getting, and I don't see how Ward 1 is going to help you if someone just keeps swinging in for 13 because they paid a buff aura and now they're coming in with a 13 attack like the ones that are in Around the Table. So Illusionist is a heavy hitter for sure. Does she fit? I don't know. So I'm not committing to that, but I don't put it past LSS to subvert expectations and do something like that. We could also see, and people have been memeing on this because I see druids and everything, and they're not wrong. But, I have a feeling that when a druid does come into the game, they are going to be a heavy hitter. They are going to probably focus on the bestial side of combat in terms of shifting into forms. And bear form is obviously going to have these big attacks. So, I could easily see that a druid fighting in the arena, kind of outside the nature element, but still, ready to throw down with lots of focuses on fangs and biting and all those kind of because I expect this arena set to be a bit gory. We've just had Cyberpunk, that kind of thing, a bit more technology, shining lights kind of stuff. I think Flesh and Blood is going from that back into its ground roots of snag and brutal attacks and guardians crushing skulls and all that kind of stuff, and really letting that element shine. And in that kind of environment, a druid that focuses on attacks and savaging and tearing people and biting them and all that kind of stuff would fit in very well. So I do see a druid in everything, but also if you're going to fit a druid in, this kind of does make room for it. If it's in there, you will give me your cold foils. I will buy them all from you. If there are marvels, I will take all the marvels. You will send them to me, and I will have them, and we will trade them, and I can give you all this useless stuff, all these shriek claws that I opened that I won't need anymore, and all my guardianness. It can all just go. We'll just tidy it into a pile and pretend that part of my Flesh and Blood life didn't happen, and then I'll just be a druid main forever. Okay, so we got this. But that's my thoughts, right? I could see how an alchemist or a merchant would fit into the whole environment of an arena. I could see that working. I could also see a druid working. Maybe that's my bias. But personally, I feel like we're not ready for a new class just yet. I feel like we're just going to have Guardian, Warrior, and Brute. And that's going to be our three classes. Maybe we'll get 6 heroes. Maybe we'll get a reprint of someone like Valda and, something like that. I don't think we'll see Bravo. I don't think he really fits into this environment. Valda's more of a bar fighting, brawling kind of person who would kind of make sense. I expect if we do see a Guardian, it might be the guy from Pulverize that everyone's super keen to get, the aggressive, high-powered Guardian who comes in with 14 power attacks. A lot of people want that, and I feel like it's been LSS have been aware that a lot of people have wanted that since Tales of Aria, so they could have responded to feedback and put that in. And I just think Axe Warrior's clearly been telegraphed for a while. And I mean, maybe they just want Dorinthia who can use axes, but I feel like this would be a good set to add in an Axe Warrior, and also maybe bring back Kasai just as like a mercenary fighting in the arena, you know, Sellsword just as a young hero. So we could see Kasai, a new Axe Warrior. We could see like Valda and like an axe-focused Guardian. And then we could see Rhinar come back maybe, but I don't know about Rhinar. I will say, so like full like tinfoil hats, leaks, whatever, because I do have sources, so I won't say where this came from, but I have heard from someone that the hero that we will be getting in this set is actually Chief Rukatan, who was the brute mentor in the Dorinthia versus Rhinar decks. I won't say how because it would reveal where it came from and all those kind of things. People who know. But it was explained to me from a reasonably credible source for a reasonably credible reason that the hero in the set would be Chief Rukatan. So that would be really cool for other people. And then we could have another young hero. I think this will very much follow the Outsiders set design. I think they were reasonably happy with how that went. So I could easily see 6 heroes, 3 that are only young and 3 that are adult. And I think that worked quite well. The last thing to talk about, because it kind of segues nicely, because I thought Outsiders worked very well. It's just initial thoughts on how Bright Lights is working. I think 4-pack sealed is working fine. I'm actually kind of enjoying it. I think if you had more packs, it would break the power level of the set. So I completely understand that. It does feel like it defaults to fatigue a lot, and I have not enjoyed stalemating with Max. That's where I can't boost, therefore I can't scrap, I can't make a hyperdriver and swing my weapon, and you can't boost, so you can't make a hyperdriver and swing your weapon, and both of us have 1 card left in our deck. That happened once to me at the pre-release, and I saw it happen again to another table. That didn't feel good, so it kind of feels like running 40 cards is the default, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're running 35 and your opponent's running 40, and even if you have a slightly better deck, they can just tax you out. And make it so that you're in a stalemate situation. So that felt bad. It also does feel a bit rough that I feel like Dash isn't signposted very well for new players. It's hard to see which of the items are good in Dash. She's much harder to put together. Just as a summary, the good items in Dash are any of the red shields, potentially the yellow dissolving shield and mini force field as well. The good items are the scripts, so security script 100%, penetration script 100%, MZA script is great too. Autosave script is fine if you're risking getting fatigued, but ideally the scripts that give your attacks plus damage, but especially the script that makes your opponent's attacks block for -1 are huge for setting up a massive turn with Dash. You just put one on the board and then with a steam counter on it, don't crank, and then hope the next turn you draw a handful of attacks. Now, you might be like me and you might draw a handful of items and feel really sad, but you're going to have a lot of boost in your Dash deck as well. Be boosting a lot, be looking at the top card of your deck, and just, when you get 2 action points, shoot your pistol twice, and she will carry you through. So have faith in Dash. If you see the right cards, the red shields, some of the scripts that bring back attacks are good, and then any of the penetration scripts, the scripts that kind of give your attacks bonuses or make it harder for your opponents to block. Even the one that lets your attacks block for 1 extra is actually really good as well, so don't be afraid of running that. So if you see those are the Dash sign points. Obviously, if you have enough Evos for each slot, you only really need 1 for each slot, to be honest. But preferably 5 or 6 Evos, you can play Teklo. And then with Max, it's just about the buffs. It's just about, do I have enough buffs? Do I have enough red cards that care about hyperdrivers, or enough red boost cards? Because you need to set turns up that are going over a certain amount of damage. You need, I think we did the ratios. If you attack with a boost card that has +4 or more attack, and then you create a hyperdriver and boost, to fully block the attack, your opponent has to spend 3 cards, and you only spent 2 cards. So that's the only ratio to consider really with Max, is obviously how many boost cards do I have, and how many buff cards do I have to make big turns. and powerful turns, but also just how many 4+ attacks do I have, so that if worst comes to worst, I can fatigue my opponent, because in order to fully block my attacks, they have to give me 3 cards per turn, and I'm only spending 2 cards per turn to get them to do that. Right? That's the only thing to consider. You can fatigue Teklevossen as max. You just have to get that ratio of 4+ power into your mind. And in fact, the best, if you've got 5 or 6s, it's really good. If you have overpower, that's fantastic. Something like Gigawatt is amazing. Red Gigawatt works on your weapons, so if you just go boost attack and then weapon for 7, you can potentially get a free steam counter on your item. There's lots of ways of making max work above the curve that you need to memorize if you want to beat the people playing fatigue. But other than that, so just talking about, and we'll wrap up on this because this has been a long episode, but I've been experimenting with slightly shorter episodes and they've been fine. People have been listening to them, but sometimes I feel like longer episodes are kind of warranted. And I know people do listen to me in kind of like a podcast form, so you don't necessarily mind settling in for a bit of an episode. And I feel like 20 to 30 minutes is probably the max that I really should be doing. So, but just to wrap up on the bright lights, I am a bit concerned for the set. I am a bit concerned about the number of people who don't like mech and aren't really vibing with the cyberpunk theme and have just kind of opted out of buying the set and are just talking about buying like a Shriek Razor, or I'm just going to show this off again because it's cold and shiny. I only opened 1 box and I opened 2 of these, which was quite nice. The expansion slot, by the way, 100% just a win. The expansion slot is a win in every single category of the word. Relevant cards for non-class, reason to buy the set for people who haven't got a class in the set. Fantastic way of just giving small power boosts to decks that aren't getting boosted by this set. And also just like, it gives them an opportunity to print cool cards that work with existing heroes that don't either warp the draft and the set they come in, or impact and detract from the theme of the set in the way that, Redback Shroud did for Azuri by requiring contracts and silver but not having any silver, right? That annoyed me. But if Redback Shroud had been an expansion slot as an option for Arachne rather than being in there to try and do something for Azuri, I would have been fine with it. So the expansion slot, 100% a win. But I am concerned by the number of people who are opting out of buying the amount of bright lights that they would have bought of other sets. Now, maybe it's counterbalanced by the number of mech fans who are buying tons of it, but I'm a bit concerned. And part of that concern is the question of, if mech players aren't buying it, are sales down across the board? I know some stores, I know one store that didn't pre-order any because no one said, hey, we want some loudly enough. So that is a concern. I do think it will be eminently draftable, so I think that will eat through a lot of boxes. And also, there is that whole, they got rid of DraftFab, which was a website people were using for drafting, so I guess it must be on their minds that drafting needs to happen for this set to be a success, or why would you turn around after, I think the site was up for 8 months, and then get rid of that site then? It's a bit of an odd choice. So I think LSS are probably aware that this is an experiment. I am delighted that they are experimenting, and I will say this, if Bright Lights feels like it's not for you, that is okay. But we're getting to a point in the game where classes and heroes have so many cards that it is becoming very, very difficult to bring a new class into the game while also making it match the power level of existing classes in the game. So the Bright Lights formula of one class for an entire set might be what is needed to introduce new classes into the game in the future, right? To get an actual Alchemist set, it might have to be a full set of Alchemist cards so that the class comes out of the gate properly supported, rather than feeling just weak out of the start of the gate, as, it could have been, like as Arachne was out of Dynasty, for example, right? He just wasn't keeping up. Now, Outsiders came along, gave him a load of cards, but imagine if we had had a full Assassin set, how powerful Assassin would have felt then. So balancing heroes with less cards than other classes is difficult, right? Because you don't just want to print a rake of super powerful cards for that class, because then you can't give them any more, right? So really what they did with Bright Lights, where they gave Mechanologists 3 adult heroes who all overlap a little bit but go off in different ways, is, I think, the best model for introducing a new class into the game in the future. And for that reason, I hope that it will be a success and they will repeat it. But there are signs at the moment that perhaps it's not selling as well as they would like, and perhaps that Draft needs to carry this set across the finish line. we will be drafting it for 3 months, I think. The next set coming out is also a draft set and is set to come out in January, start of February. It's set to come out in the start of February. Yeah, the preview event's at the end of January. So we will only be drafting this for 3 months, and one of those is Christmas, which is a notoriously slower month in December. So it will be interesting. It will be interesting to see. But also, like, it's not a bad thing for a community, right, to have 2 draft sets that are playable at the same time. So if there's still Bright Lights kicking around, and, you know, once Heavy Hitters comes out, there's 3 or 4 months until the next set. So if for the 3 or 4 months into maybe April next year, we have both Bright Lights and Heavy Hitters on the shelves, and we can say which one we want to draft, I think that's actually kind of good. People are getting, like, a little bit fatigued of, like, what can we draft now? And we've been kind of like, oh, we'll do a TOA draft, or we'll go back to Monarch, or hey, someone found a box of WTR, right? You know, let's do that. But I think if Bright Lights is fun, which I think it will be, once I've only drafted it twice, but it feels fun. And if Heavy Hitters is a fun draft, then to be able to go, well, let's draft Heavy Hitters this week, and then 2 weeks later, well, let's draft Bright Lights now, is actually really, really good for playgroups to give them variety. And it means they'll be able to draft more overall, which means stores will be getting more money overall. You see what I mean? It's a very good thing. So Bright Lights, I am concerned, but overall, I am really enjoying the set dedicated to one class. I've bought less, it's not for me, but it's still a really good set. And I have to say, the fact that we're seeing a showcase of 3 different ways that mechanologists can go is just brilliant. I love having a lot of classes. I really delight in the fact that Brian Gottlieb has said they're going to flood the game with new heroes, which is why they've upped the living legend points and things like that with all these draft sets over the next few months. I want more heroes. I want more variety. I want to be able to pick up, say I'm going to play Guardian and genuinely have a choice between 3 different heroes and 3 different archetypes, and maybe I can do an archetype with a hero that's not supposed to do that archetype, and then that creates like deck building ways to win and stuff like that. I find all that stuff fascinating, so I can't wait for that to happen. I'm really excited for new heroes, and obviously I'm really excited for any new classes they bring out, though personally I'm going to have to be very careful about which classes I get into, just because I'm already kind of, like, I've got my stable of classes full at the moment. I can't really easily add someone without cutting one, just in terms of my budget that I've allotted for Flesh and Blood. So that's where we are. As always, I've been Steelfur. This has been Steelfur Speaks. Just wrapping up on the last few things for the extra diehard listeners who I know care about these sorts of things. Ray Fables, the Tales of Aria that I've been writing, the Flow's Choice. Chapter 7 is done. Chapter 8 is half done. Chapter 9 is planned but not written. Remember that all the chapters come in 3s, so 7, 8 and 9 all focus on Ishika in her position. She's arrived in Vault Haven. She's gone through this harrowing experience that we've seen where she's allied with some of the natural fauna of the place to fight off this band of actually wolves that attacked her. And now she's getting to grips with the mystery of what caused that attack, and also going into the actual home of the Rosetta, so the order of warriors that Briar comes from, and of course Petal, who is one of her fellow soldiers, as well as Marcus and Graneth, who are also members of the Rosetta as well. They're taking her home, and then she's going to meet a whole cast of characters from Candlehold, including the Queen of Thorns herself, as well as various other people. And then she's going to begin to understand the roots of the threat that it has brought her to Aria to help solve, and understand how she relates to the land that she has come to call home. Once we have done that, we are going to go back to the frozen wastes of Eisenloft, back to Pierce, who is, went from being in Solana in dangerous and tricky, difficult circumstances, I won't spoil that, to being in a snowdrift next to an Olin, fighting a demon. We're going to go back to there, and we're going to find out what's happening with Pierce. And then once we've done that, so once we get to chapter 12, so chapter 13, because they always come in 3s, this is how I'm writing them, then we're going to get into our 3rd main character, who you may have already met, but that's okay. So he's going to come in, and then we're going to have his arc, and then we'll be on chapter 15, and then it will be time to start wrapping up to the grand final. There will be 21 chapters, so for those of you thinking, what's he going to do? How long is this going to go on for? When I publish chapter 10, we'll actually be close to halfway through the story that I'm planning to write for everyone. Chapters all the way to 21, they are planned. I have notes on all of them. It's just a matter of finding the time to sit down and do it. So if you're enjoying A Flow's Choice, that is very much still ongoing. I know I haven't published anything in 3 months, but it's kind of hard to do that and do all the writing I have to do for work and the travel and stuff like that. So I did a lot of writing on the plane. I've been really enjoying working my way through the various characters that are going on there, as well as refining various things and getting things going. The other, of course, side project, which I do encourage you to read if you haven't read, there is chapter 1. There will be like 3 or 4 chapters in that, are the Tales of Nip and Gruff. They are meat-focused adventures in the land of Aria, so they are at the Everfest Carnival. They are focused on the mischievous meeps. I have kind of done that thing you can do where you say they're talking like animals, but actually we can understand them, and given them all Cockney accents, it's a way of doing things. It's a way of telling animal stories without, trying to fill the whole thing with like explanations of what they're doing. Like, you need to give them personas and words, I find, to get that character out. So they are mischievous. They are stealing lots of shiny things. There is a code and things that they follow, and they have got mysterious Cockney accents for good reasons. But that's just on there. That's a side adventure. So people who are wondering about that, that is still updated. And then just, as the final thing, I do still have a Patreon. I have just 2 tiers on my Patreon, which basically just lets me know which of my content you support. You can either support the writing tier or the podcast tier. It's £3 either way, and it's just a way of you showing some support for what I'm doing. When I reach more of a critical mass, I will go back to doing giveaways. So for those of you who don't know, I did cancel all my Patreons because when I originally launched the Patreon, it was with a view of I'm going to do coaching and I'm going to do my own deck techs and I'm going to do all this kind of stuff, and I realized that wasn't really sustainable with the amount of time I have as a solo content creator to deliver on those kind of things. So I cancelled everyone's Patreons. I refunded a lot of people who I thought were following me for those reasons. Not everyone, not always. I had conversations, those kind of things. And then I relaunched the Patreon with just these 2 simple tiers saying, look, if you like what I'm doing, support me, and I'll see what I can do to get it back to you. And I do still have content creator promos. I do still have Heralds of Rebirth. I do still have, playmats and stuff like that to give away. Once I get enough people to make it practical, I will start doing playmat giveaways as well. So if you want to be a Patreon, you can subscribe to that. Anyone who has been subscribed for like a month will get an entry until I do a giveaway. So if you subscribe now, then when I get around to doing a giveaway in like 2-3 months time, you will have 3 entries. It won't just be a 1 entry per Patreon for that month. So just keep that in mind. There is one person out there who will definitely have multiple entries in the giveaway, so I might not let him enter. I might just give him something else instead, and he is my most stalwart Patreon. So he will have multiple entries, but I might just give him something and then do the giveaway with everyone else. And that's it, really. That's everything that's going on with the channel. I can't really think of anything else fab related or otherwise. That's it. If you want to see how I live my life, this is a bottle of Talisker Dark Storm. It is still mostly full. I've had a few glasses of it. This is a single malt Scotch whiskey from the Isle of Skye. It is very, very peaty, very delicious. I have a glass of this every now and then. And then I replace it with a different bottle, because I like a few bottles. I went whiskey tasting in Edinburgh last year, and that was one of the bottles that came back as being something I really enjoyed, and I really do. So that's the sort of thing that's going on in my life right now. Lots of cooking, bit of drinking, lots of working, unfortunately, and then playing Flesh and Blood when the time and tides allow it. Thank you all for listening, and I will speak to you all very, very soon.